Hi guys, Davey here from Peace Officers UK. So this video I was going to make about a week ago in response to a comment left in my Telegram group, Peace Officers UK. However, unfortunately, I've been extremely busy all week doing family stuff and Peace Officers stuff. The Peace Officers takes up Monday to Sunday. So my apologies for the delay in the video response. Now, I said I was going to make a video because obviously explaining it all in a message, would take forever to type out. But I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. Good luck with that, Davey. So the inquiry, I'm not going to read it out word for word, but the gist of it was that somebody asked, what advice should they take, because they're getting conflicting advice on how to deal with civil matters, etc., debt related, enforcement agents, all that sort of stuff, contracts, that kind of thing. Different advice from different people, and it varies so dramatically that what is the correct advice. I just want to say that there's a perfectly good reason as to why there is such differing advice. I myself give differing advice to different people, and it's because it depends on the nuances of their particular situation, right? So let me give you an example, or a couple of examples. First example, you've got, let's say, twins, okay? Twin men who have got equal families, so their situations, their circumstances are pretty much the same, okay? They've each got a couple of kids and a wife and a house they live in. However, one of them lives in social housing association or council, and the other one has a mortgage, okay? Now, of course, the same bit of advice is not necessarily going to fit both situations. Let's say they are dealing with council tax demands, for example. Okay, they both get hassled by the council equally. They both seek advice on how to deal with it. So to the person who's in social housing, of course, the advice can be, well, just ignore it and deal with the enforcement agents when they get to your front door. You can trespass them, you can get rid of them. And you're lawfully and legally entitled to do so. However, with the other person B, who has a mortgage, the advice would need to be slightly different, because a charging order could be applied for, or at least applied, whether it be legally applied or not, to their property. And once that's been applied to the property, the council will then seek to petition the county court for bankruptcy against you or against person B. So the situations are not the same. They're both in the same dilemma. They're both dealing with the same council. But with one, they're not going to lose their property because they haven't paid their council tax. The other one, the council is going to petition for bankruptcy. The bankruptcy will likely be awarded, and the house will then be put up for sale, at which point the charging order would be satisfied and the council would get their money. So, of course, there has to be two different methods for that same situation, just based on the nuance that one owns their own home, technically, and the other one rents. Okay, so the advice must be different. because their situations must be are different. Another example would be, again, same two twins, both in the same situation this time. Both of them are in social housing, okay? However, again, both need different advice, because one of them works for Tesco's, and person A works for Tesco's, and person B is self-employed, okay? Maybe a carpenter, plumber, whatever, carpet fitter, whatever. But they're self-employed, right? Which means one of them could be subject to an attachment to earnings order, where the money's automatically deducted from their their employer, such as Tesco, for example, will automatically make deductions and pay it to the council. The other one is safe, because they are their own employer and they're not going to agree to deduct payments from themselves. So this is why when I give advice, I have to do it on a very bespoke, from a very bespoke point of view. Now, what I do is I don't actually, in a sense, legally speaking, give legal advice. Why not? Because I'm not qualified to. I don't have the certification. I didn't take any bar exam. I didn't pledge any oath and allegiance to the Crown. So therefore, I'm not entitled to, according to the law, to give legal advice. So what I do is I ascertain certain details, right? And I want to know. So if you come to me and say, what do I do about council tax? Well, I need to know what you've done already, whether you've communicated, whether you've made any agreements that you've signed to, what action has been taken against you, what type of house you live in, whether you own or rent, do you have a vehicle that's worth more than or less than £1,350? What else would there be as an example? Oh yeah, I mean, you know, do you work? Are you unemployed? Are you in receipt of state benefits, where attachment to earnings orders could be applied? So I have to take all these into consideration. Then what I do is I step into your shoes. Okay, I put myself into your situation, and then I will tell you what I would do in that situation. Okay, so that's kind of how I work. And a lot of people, obviously, that have dealt with me, spoken with me, or seen my responses to things would likely notice that I generally say, I would do this, I would do that, rather than you should do this or you should do that. It's complicated, but simple at the same time, loophole, as it were. So, you know, I can only tell you what I would do in those situations based on those variables. But of course, those variables are very important, okay, and can change the outcome of the situation. So those variables, I need to know everything about that situation, yeah, so that there's no surprises, because I've had many situations where I've helped, and it's not until we got to the court stage that I discovered what was written in a particular statement on a notice of intended prosecution compared to what should have been written. And, you know, I found out at the point of being a Mackenzie friend in court. So in order to eradicate surprises, that's why I need to find out more about you, not your personal sort of details, like, you know, your date of birth and all that sort of stuff, not even your address, just the type of house you're in, or your rent/ownership situation, whether you own a vehicle, how much that vehicle is worth approximately. All of these things matter, and all of these things will change how I would approach something, okay? And therefore what you garner from that, from what I would do, is entirely upon your shoulders. You take full responsibility for. I say that, of course, I have a duty of care as well when I'm helping people, okay? I have a duty of care to ensure that if I'm telling them I would do that, then that's definitely what I would do. And I generally seem to be quite successful in what I do, especially in my everyday life, dealing with enforcement agents, council tax, all of that. I've never paid a penny of council tax in my life, never spent a day in prison in my life. So, as I say, the variables change what the advice might be. Now, one thing I would say is, and would plead for people to do, is to drop the common law or so-called common law approach, okay? The reason being is because common law is not independent of maritime admiralty law. It's actually part of maritime admiralty law. In fact, if you are prosecuted for theft in an admiralty maritime court, i.e. a magistrate's court or crown court, then, you know, the theft is contrary to common law. That is what is read out, would be read out in court, or what is quoted to you when you're arrested under the Theft Act 1968, contrary to common law. So common law is actually, all this common law means, I mean, a lot of people believe it means this whole separate law system. It doesn't, okay? It doesn't. That's confused with natural law, okay? Natural law is the rights of men and women, okay, as living, breathing, bleeding beings, okay? Anything else is admiralty law, yeah? If you're relying upon things like ancient doctrines and charters such as the Great Charter, the Magna Carta 1215, and I do know that I said Magna and not Magna, because in Latin, Magna is the correct way of pronouncing it. Magna Carta 1215, what you have to understand is that the Magna Carta was signed under duress by King John on threat of punishment should he fail to agree to it. Therefore, weeks later, in 1215, it was annulled by Pope Innocent III. Okay, he annulled it, which means it's not recognised because it was signed under duress, which makes perfect sense to me, because I would argue the same. If I was told you either sign this or else, and I'm not the sort of person that would, but let's say I was the sort of person that would fall for the intimidation, and I signed it under duress, yeah, so that later I can claim that it's null and void because it was signed under duress. We all know the story of King John, how he was cornered by the barons and given an ultimatum, yeah. Well, an ultimatum is under duress. So if you're relying upon what is written within the Magna Carta, as you would call it, or the Magna Carta, however you wish to pronounce it, and it's fine to call it Magna Carta, by the way, I'm just being pedantic, but then you do so at your peril, okay? My advice to anybody, and this is not necessarily official legal advice, but it's how I live my life, okay? I learn a lot of legislation, a lot. I don't play games like Candy Crush and, you know, Tetris or whatever. I spend my time researching. That's fun for me, okay? I learn to quote legislations, to various sections. I learn to understand them. And all I'm doing is learning the rules to a much bigger game. Okay, the system, if you think of the system as i.e. the maritime admiralty law system, the law of contracts, the laws of trade, where you are considered to be a commercial entity, rather than fighting that and trying to proclaim that I am a living man, even though I'm telling dead entities, legal fictions, that I'm a living man, which completely contradicts natural law, which is the living and the dead cannot communicate. So who are you telling? If you're telling somebody who's dead that you're alive, a living man or a living woman, by default, you're declaring yourself as dead. Doesn't matter what words come out of your mouth, because you're communicating with the dead, because they only see you as dead, as a legal fiction, a birth trust, call it if you want, the Seta KV trust, but you exist to them on paper. Okay, you are human. You're not man. You are human. The hue of man, i.e. a colour of man, the version of man, and a version of man is a monster. Okay, so they see you as a monster, as a human. So it doesn't matter what you say to them and say common law this, ancient law that. They're not listening. So your best bet is to learn the rules on how to play their version of chess. Yeah, because they have to play by those rules. Those rules are set. Yeah, that's a game. Yeah, it's a theatre, it's a game, it's an act, whatever you want to call it. The fact that it's a game means it's got a certain set of rules. So when you come along into their courts and you say, I don't accept your jurisdiction, well, first of all, what are you doing in their courts? Get out. Yeah, that's their house. If you come into my house, there's a certain set of rules that you have to abide by. Don't care how sovereign you are, don't care who you are, you abide by those rules or you're kicked out. It's my jurisdiction, mine and my wife's jurisdiction in this house. Okay, so it's the same in their courts. You can't go in there, start effing and jeffing and shouting and saying, I'm a sovereign man, I'm a sovereign woman, I can do what I want, you have no power over me. I'm afraid they do. You entered their jurisdiction, you walked into their jurisdiction, into their court. You can't then preach to them their rules. Okay, so it's important for people to understand that, rather than keep using that system. And I can guarantee you, as soon as you use any kind of sovereign argument, freeman on the land, whatever you want to call it, they are wise to this. I was sent a link quite some time ago now, probably about 8 months ago, six to 8 months ago, to a forum that's used by the legal sector, such as, barristers, solicitors, magistrates and judges, even justices of the peace and whatever. It's their kind of chat rooms, essentially, or forums. And it was being discussed in this forum about the freemen on the land. That's how they refer to them in the court, the sovereign argument. And one of the, I can't remember whether it was a judge or a magistrate, but one of them said, I haven't had one of these freemen on the land in my court yet, but as soon as I do, they're definitely losing their case. Well, that's not proper justice, is it? Right? But that's how they think of you. When you use that argument, that common law argument, which is actually, common law just means it applies to the common man. But the problem with common law is it's written by uncommon men. Okay? And it's always written, when it's written by uncommon men, it's written in the favour of uncommon men and not the common man. It's what the common man has to abide by, right? But they get to pick and choose, right, which elements of it are relevant to the current legal system and which aren't. Yeah. So to learn common law, you can spend your entirety learning it. So I keep calling it common law, but That's what people refer to it as. That's what they're actually preaching is natural law. And what they do is they get things very confused. Okay. So I've seen, for example, videos of people claiming they're a sovereign man, right? And that they don't stand under their statutes and acts of parliament, whilst at the same time threatening to arrest a bailiff or a police officer using section 24A of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, an act of parliament, legislation, a section, etc., etc. So it's a mishmash of half-truths, okay, that get mangled together, and people believe, especially over the last half a dozen years, people start thinking this is our way out, this is total freedom. Unfortunately, you're never going to be free, okay, because you don't own any of these lands. They're already claimed, and those people are not going to give them up without battle, okay. That's a simple fact. So when it comes to things like, can I deregister my car? Yes, you can deregister your car because you own it and you're entitled to own property. You're a living man, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you didn't build the car. It was registered to the DVLA, therefore gifted by the manufacturers or the sales, whoever sold it to the DVLA, and the DVLA allows you to use it. Okay, well, maybe you can deregister it and etc., etc. Maybe there's a way. I've yet to see it happen with anybody, and I've been studying common law for best part of 20 years. I've yet to see it work. Okay, I'm only interested in stuff that works. If it doesn't work, then I have no interest in it, and I will find why it doesn't work, and I will apply those things to things that will work. Okay, or I know to work or whatever. But there's never any guarantees because, as I say, two people, there might be just one slight nuance in one person's situation than there is in another's, and therefore it changes the result of what they hope to achieve. So all the variables are very, very important. So, as I say, if you're going to go, what essentially anybody who's trying to go down the common law route is doing is going to the chess players in a game of chess and saying, but I want to play backgammon. Yeah, I don't want to play chess. I want to play backgammon. I'm entitled to play backgammon. Yeah, as a sovereign man, I get to play whatever game I want to play. I have unalienable rights, right? Say all of that, right? But they're playing chess, yeah? And they're only interested in the rules of chess. If you come along and say, I'm playing backgammon, they'll say, no, you're not. You're playing chess, like it or not. If not, get out of this chess room. You know, it's as simple as that. Okay. So some of the advice out there, in fact, much of it, quite a lot of it, can be very bad advice. Yeah. It's not a one size fits all situation. Okay. It's not a one size fits all because not everybody has got the exact same variables in their life as everybody else. Okay. And as I say, two cases that can seem almost carbon copies can have one little difference, something that leaves them potentially open to having their house stolen by the council, for example, being blacklisted and, you know, bankrupt, right? So, you know, one tiny little detail, that's all it takes to change the outcome of the situation. So it's important to take that into consideration, and that's what I do. I take these things into consideration. It's quite bespoke. If I'm, you know, as I say, I will want to know all about your situation and what you're, you know, whether you're working, whether you're on benefits, because I need to advise you how to potentially stop them from taking, not that you'll necessarily stop them from taking deductions, but how to then question it if they do, and potentially take action against them in the county courts. You see, now only a tiny percentage of people, and I do mean tiny, minuscule, microscopic percentage of people will actually take it the full fight. Most people want a simple fix. I'm afraid there is no simple fix, okay? Every single method comes with some degree of a fight, yeah? Varying levels. Some will come with people banging on your door, demanding money from you. I mean, obviously I can offer methods on how to deal with that, as I often do. Some will apply for charging orders to put against your property and then force you into the sale of the property by bankrupting you and leaving you essentially out on the street. Of course, your advice needs to be different to somebody who is self-employed and living in social housing and owns a car, or either doesn't own a car or owns a car that's worth, I don't know, a few £100. Yeah, they're going to be in the best possible situation. And my advice, or what I would advise myself if I was in their shoes, would be just ignore them. Just ignore them. Wait till they come banging on your door, open the door and just go, nope, not interested, thank you, bye-bye, and shut the door. Don't even get into a debate about trespass or anything like that. There's nothing they can do to you. Nothing. You're untouchable. Okay? You're not on state benefits, so they can't deduct it from your benefits. You don't work for an employer, so they can't force your or threaten your employer to deduct it. So they've got nothing. Yeah, absolutely zilch. You're in the best boat. You're in the best position. You are the lucky one. Okay. The unlucky ones are the ones that have got assets, because those assets they'll try and steal them from under their nose. Yeah. And that's when it comes with an even bigger fight. And you have to be fierce in that fight, and you have to be prepared to take that fight to its ultimate conclusion, and maybe even beyond. You might have to go through an appeal process. You might even lose that, and therefore you might have to go for judicial review or to the Supreme Court and get your case heard then. I mean, the recent findings of the Supreme Court in the Equality Act 2010 definition of what a woman is, that being a biological sex, those women that took that to court, those women from Scotland, fantastic women, real true warriors and fighters, didn't give up. It went to court, they lost their case. They went to appeal, they lost their case. They took it to the Supreme Court, they won their case. That took a lot of effort. That took a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of energy. And let's face it, a lot of these organizations know how to grind you down and how to get you to quit, which is why it's such a minuscule, microscopic amount of very determined, energetic people to take it through to its conclusion, you know, regardless of how high they have to take it, even to the European Courts of Justice or human rights, whatever. You've got to just keep going. A fight is only over the moment you give up. The moment you give up, the fight's over. Now, in most of these situations, I'm afraid your credit score is likely to be devastated, or at least quite severely injured. If you care about your credit rating, then my recommendation, if I was in your shoes and I give a damn about credit rating because I might want to get a mortgage in future, or I want to accumulate some debt slavery, some credit cards, for example, bank loans, car finance, all that sort of stuff, then my advice to myself would be just pay it. Just pay it. Pay your bills as normal, and you won't have any hassle. Your credit score will inflate, go sky high. You can get whatever you want, buy yourself a palace if you want, and a Ferrari to go with it. But the more you've got, the more you've got to lose, the more you've got for them to take away, the more enslaved you are in that system. So I don't become obsessed with my credit score. Couldn't give a monkeys. I've got a couple of credit cards. My credit rating is shot. Yeah, it's pretty shot. Not the worst, but it's shot enough that I wouldn't get a loan or a mortgage, and I would struggle. I would get a poor rate APR on a credit card. Okay, it will be a repair your credit type credit card with probably 39.9% APR or something ridiculously stupid. So it's really dependent on your situation, on what you want to achieve, as to what advice you choose to take. But go into any advice, right? Take any advice you desire, but go into it knowing that there may be nuances, that advice may have been given exactly the same to somebody else, but should have been slightly changed because the variables were different. Yeah, one owned a vehicle, one didn't. One owned their home, the other didn't. You know, one was working, one wasn't, or one was self-employed, the other was working. So there is, as I say, there is no one single method that one size fits all. And I'm afraid that's just a reality. That's just a fact, you know. So it has to be attuned to your personal situation. So bear that in mind with whoever's advice you take, whether you take mine or somebody else's or go down the common law route, whatever. Just know that you're in for a fight one way or another. And the object, in my opinion, the object of the game is to use as least of your energy as you can when doing it. Okay, so the path of least resistance, but the one that suits you and works in your favor. Okay, but it will always come with a fight. Always come with something, consequences of some degree. The only way to not have it come as some consequence to yourself is to just pay. Whatever anybody asks you, you just go, yeah, fine, pay it. Yeah. And then you won't get any hassles, any fights or anything like that. But you will be quite the slave, you know. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers as to why there are so many different methods out there and the advice can change from person to person. It's simply the variables. That's all. I will be making some more videos discussing issues, training, what to do in this situation or that situation. So I will see you on the next one and hopefully the ones after that. Take care, everyone. Lots of love. Peace.